this time. So just to take a moment to be inside, to be peaceful. Thank you. So when we sit for just a moment of quiet, a moment of silence, what tends to happen with the mind? You know, it's like I've created quite a bit of space in my mind. You know, it's like I'm saying, okay, I want there to be space inside. And of course, a little bit like, when you move water away, unless you have something to stop it, it's just going to come back. You know? And so uh, I think this is what happens with our thoughts is that unless we have some very clear direction and a clear focus that acts as a little bit like you know uh, like the river bed, shall we say, then the water will just flow anywhere and everywhere. And so this is what often happens with our mind, is that you sit down, like, can you remember what you were thinking in those just few seconds? I think it was maybe 30 seconds. What came up? you know can you remember? Was it clear for you? You know, was it a specific thing that came up for you? And it's during those times often what happens is that if you just had a conversation with someone, if you just finished something, or if there's some underlying issue, then that thing will come up uh, very quickly and will become part of will occupy the space in the mind. And so what I thought today was very simple to look at actually this whole question, this very basic and very simple question, but it's a question that really is keeps coming back. It's the question of who am I? Oh, and not just who am I in the sense of my life and my history and my story, but more specifically beyond my history, beyond my geography, beyond my current physical context. How can I describe myself? What is my nature? What am I made of? Um, how long have I been around? Where am I going? And so sometimes we have those questions for our lives and what we're doing every day, and does it have meaning, and is it something that's a contribution for the world? Is it something that's fulfilling, satisfying for me? Is it something that is in line with my principles? So maybe we often have these questions, and these are very good and very important questions, I think, to continue to have and to continue to respond to and understand more deeply. But I think it's very important to go one step further in and ask those same questions for our being, for my who I am innately, originally, who I always am, even before I got this name, even before, I got this body, and after this body will finish. Mm. So sometimes when someone passes away, we say rest in peace. Well, what does that mean? And who's gone, and who's resting, and what's left, and where have they gone? Where are they going to rest? You know, and even when a little baby comes, the question is, well, where has this being come from? Who is this being? And it's very clear, the energy of this little person is a very specific energy. And this energy is not necessarily an energy that I can say has been created. No, it's an energy, that a being that is anyway in existence and has now come into my context. No. And so I have now the chance to interact with this being. And I think it's very important to have um, a clear understanding about this deeper identity, simply because our current physical identity tends to be based on things that are changing all the time and are going to change, because that's the nature of life, is that it changes. And so it's really useful for an emotional stability, for that sense of a bigger picture, to be able to, not hold on and not be completely devastated when something happens in our context. Um, is to have this deeper understanding and certainty of what's behind everything, what's behind my my whole physical image. And so this is something that I found very useful in this study, is this understanding, just on a very practical level, is that um, when I identify myself, um, I'm actually, my identity is beyond male and female, is beyond a particular nationality, it's beyond a particular culture and religion. So it means that I don't have to choose either or. I don't have to choose this is better and that's worse. I don't have to make any judgments about, this is good and that's bad. In fact, it's just simply a question of saying, yes, all of that exists, all my relationships exist, all of this whole context is there, but I identify myself. Who is it that I say I am? And with what do I have the sense of belonging? So, we might say, well, yes, we're all from, one particular school. And so if someone comes up and begins to criticize the school, then we feel like they've criticized us, because we completely identify with the school. And so it's as if I'm saying, I am my school. Whereas actually the truth about that is that for this year, until this year, I went to this particular school, and I absorbed many things that were great and many things that were not so great, you know. And I don't need to feel good or bad about myself based on whether I went to a particular school or not. And so now that is just one example, but that applies to everything within our lives, in the sense of what is it that I identify myself with. Because we live in a world that's full of judgments, full of public opinion, and especially in the culture that we've all grown up in, public opinion is of utmost importance. What other people think is like number one. And maybe we've learned how to say, okay, actually, maybe it's not number one after all. And we've learned how to stand up for ourselves and to consider our own ideas and to consider more options and to give weight to things that need to be given weight. But still, the the underlying, when it comes down to it, very often the way we make our decisions is still based on, approval or on other people's opinions. And that would happen only because I identify myself so completely with my context. And so it's like saying, okay, I respect and I appreciate, and my context, I need my context because it's to do with my physical dimension. But actually, let me experience and let me go into who I truly am, which will exist even after I leave this body, even if all the people, even after all the people around me have gone. My identity will still be the identity of the truth. And so I find it's a very stabilizing factor to have that kind of a certainty about who I am. So I just want to describe just very briefly, and I think a lot of these things will be pretty familiar for most of you, but it's just useful. I find it's always useful to just have it in front again and maybe consider it, simply because even those who've been practicing meditation and yoga, Raj Yoga, for many, many years, find that this is the slipperiest of awareness, is the awareness of the self as a spiritual being. Just because it's so intangible, because you can't see with these physical eyes, you can't do anything except perceive. And we've learned that perception may or may not be reality. What you see is what's there, and everything else is one big question mark. But actually, within spirituality and within the whole aspect of consciousness and awareness, um, the awareness and the certainty, there's this word nischay, which doesn't just mean faith, but it actually means certainty. So where I am sure that actually what I see in these pictures and the screen, is the cloth that's covering the real being, is the costume. And the real you is invisible and is a being of living consciousness and eternal. Eternal means that you have always been you. I have always been me, but not the me as in Radha in this context with female body from this culture, from all my history and geography, which is all fine, but it's to do with my one little piece of my eternity. And so there's a huge amount more, and we don't have to know the details. We don't have to know what I was in my previous birth, or we don't need to go into all of that, but just the awareness that in fact who I am is beyond this physical context, and who I am is a being of living, spiritual, intangible, non material energy. And this energy is the energy of 5 specific qualities, which we use words to describe these, but in fact, it's about an energy. So that makes up my being, that I, the being, express myself and the way it comes out is in the form of this energy. And so this energy, in when I'm able to express myself and when I'm in my full power, this is the energy of peace, of love, of purity, of bliss, and of power. And so it's like these are the five elements of the spiritual being, of the soul. You know? So just like the body is made up of the five elements of nature, of matter, so earth, water, ether, fire, and air. And so in the same way, and that's physical energy, and the body, the physical body, has each of these five elements, and it's a combination. So in a sense, you don't know where the water, the body is 70% or 75% water, but it's not that it's in one specific area and then there's another section for earth and another section for fire. No, it's all interrelated, and it's all combined. And so in the same way, in the spiritual being, in the soul, in I, the soul, there are these five elements of peace, love, purity, bliss, and power. And this is all, these elements are what make up I, the spiritual being. And when I am aware of myself, then that is consciousness in an awake state. You know? And so the more I can be awake and aware of myself, the more I am actually close to these qualities. So the more I can have thoughts that are peaceful and loving, and then of course all the different um, forms that takes, and actually be able to translate that and bring that into my current context. So for example, in any situation in my current context that I may find myself in, someone is challenging me about some idea that I have, for example. And in that moment, whilst hearing their idea or their challenge rather, I may be so attached to my idea that I feel angry that how could they dare challenge my idea, that they shouldn't be so angry with me, but then I get angry because they have got angry. So I have, in that moment, become distant from my original nature of peace. And so, what I need to do very simply in that moment is to become aware of myself as a being of peace, as a spiritual entity, as an energy that whose main property, whose main content is peaceful, loving energy. And this will give me the strength to find the position where I'm able to be consistent with who I am. So I'm able to then reconnect with my true energy as a peaceful being, and therefore create thoughts that are in line with who I am. And so all of this may sound fairly easy and fairly logical, but when we come down to it, because for a long time, and I mean probably more than one birth, we have been used to reacting from the perspective of being distant from who we are. We've been in the awareness of being physical beings, and that everything around you is what there is and that's it. And even though we might kind of have a vague idea that yes, the spiritual dimension and prayer and religion and God and so on, but it's kind of fairly removed for most people. Um, and so to be able to tune in with these things takes time, and it takes practice. But it's very, very powerful to consider the self to be a spiritual being and a being of peace, and to act as if you are. So we have been acting as if we are physical bodies, as if we are men and women. But in fact, it's not true. I have a female body. Someone else has a male body. And so that's the truth about it. But I, the spiritual being, am neither male nor female. No. My physical context is, yes, one or the other, or any other different denomination as one may choose to. But the truth about it is that whatever kind of body I have, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, it's young or old, whether it's male or female, whether it's tall or short or fat or thin, but in fact I am not that. It is, the body is an object, but I am not an object. And I, the spiritual being, can choose how to treat this object that I have in trust for a certain number of years. And so it brings a whole different context, whole different perspective, actually, is what I mean to say. And it means that I treat myself different. I treat my body in a different way. I treat my relationships in a different way. But we need to remind ourselves about it because it's very slippery. And it's very easy to keep to remain a slave to our physical senses, but not just our physical senses, also to our emotional patterns and habits, the habits that our mind has got into, basically, of reacting angrily, for example, simply because you think someone should or shouldn't do something. And uh, and so just because someone did something, I lost my peace. That is very, actually, if you think about it, it's a very strange thing. you know Someone else did something and I lost my peace. What's going on? you know and so it's, I don't know what you think about that, but any thoughts you have, and then I wanted to read something and we can have a meditation on that. So, anyone who likes to, yeah, please.
Thanks, Radha. I think that was quite interesting. And when you speak about awareness and about reacting and habits,
Mm,
I'd just like to share that this is something that I've been reading a little bit about actually recently. Um, and I've found over the last few weeks, one of the things I've been attempting to do is to be aware of, in the daytime, of every single thing that you do.
mm,
Because what happens, again, okay, I was reading it saying that if you do that, if you're aware of every word, every action, uh, every kind of everything that you're doing, anything that triggers a bad habit or any habit from your subconscious can't pass through your consciousness if you're aware of it.
mm,
So it takes a lot of work. It's not easy necessarily, and but uh, I find myself catching myself doing repeating certain old bad habits immediately sometimes, and just because I'm a little bit more aware. And you're right. I think then what happens is when situations that would normally frustrate you or uh, you know take you into those beta waves, probably are easier to handle um, if you're able to do that.
yes. Yes, that's a great point and great practice, really. Because once it comes into your awareness, it's like you again have a choice. Whereas when it's all
Yep.
subconscious and underneath, you made a choice maybe many years ago,
Yeah.
and it's like default. So that's great.
And sorry, the other thing you mentioned right at the end about somebody did something and I got upset, or yeah, and again, same thing is like if you can, because this is again all hardwired into us, I guess, from
Mm,
our backgrounds in many ways, right? Saying, uh, you know, somebody said this about me. It's like you can control how you feel about what anybody says or does anything. And I think that's another practice that if you can work on, you'll find it easier to kind of get through the day-to-day stuff and not have to worry too much about physical space and physical matter.
Mm. Yes. Thank you.
That's all I had to share. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Hundel. So we don't hear you, Hundel.
You know,
Yes. Yes.
you used the word bliss. Could you
Mm.
elaborate a little bit more on that? What does that mean, apart from the little dictionary meaning of it?
Yeah. In my experience, bliss is that state where there's like you are beyond any kind of physical sensation, but the experience in the mind or in the heart is that of a real sweetness, which is a sweetness that is literally beyond the senses. And sometimes it's called supersensuous bliss, which describes it quite well because it's not coming from any kind of physical sensation. And so, on a physical level, you may say pleasure, but on a completely non physical level, it's bliss. And I think there's an element of the energy of love and sweetness, and it's quite difficult to describe, but it's like it's like floating. You just merge into that experience. You don't have to do anything. And there's a kind of a stillness in there. But it's, um, I think you have to experience it. And I think each one of us innately knows, and it's part of our being, and we long for that, I think. And then, of course, because we're so connected with our physical senses, we try to get it through the physical, but it's just not the same thing. What did you say, Hundan?
Thank you so much, Radha. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, I have a question here,
Great.
Radha.
Hi.
Uh,
Yeah.
Hi, Namrita here. Uh,
Mm.
the question is like, okay, for a bit, I have, so to say, experienced this kind of bliss just for a day after a meditation. But it was easily spoiled. And how do I control that, by somebody else's, some negative impact on me, some words which troubled me, or something, how do you just hold on to that blissful state?
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I personally feel two things. One is that no experience goes to waste, in the sense that if I've experienced it, then it is my wealth. It is part of me, my recent, and it becomes part of my wealth of experience, basically. And so, even if after a few moments I'm not in that same state, it doesn't mean that my experience has been removed or destroyed. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that I also feel that we have peak experiences, and bliss is a peak experience. And so, how wide is a peak? It's just a point, in the sense that it's not like a plateau where you can stay there very long. And so a peak means it's you reach there and usually you go down the other side. And so I think it's unreasonable or unlikely to expect peak experiences to last for more than a very short amount of time, and um, and to give as much value as to the rest of the experience as to the peak of it, you know, because it's only by going up one side and coming down the other side that the peak has its value. And the reality is that we we don't always have that same intensity of consciousness. um, we're not able to keep that, and it's we live in a specific context, we interact, we have roles and responsibilities, and maybe eventually we can extend the amount of time and uh, the quantity of how often we experience that peak. But I think it's supposed to be like that. No, that these are very intense experiences, and you don't need much of it to make a big change. No. But it's powerful enough. It's like a drug in a sense, to make you want it again, and to make the effort to get there again.
Yes, you're right. Yes, it's very addictive, and you want to go back to that experience and get it, but
Yes.
it's very difficult to attain that kind of blissful state time
Yes.
and again.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to read a little piece by Dadi Janki, and it's from her book called Companion of God. And this is called Original Peace. So it is not necessary to search for peace, it is within. Your original state is one of peace. External situations will pull you away from your peace, if that is, you let them. Internal feelings can also pull you away. Tiredness, for example, leads to irritability. Learn to be in charge of yourself and maintain your peace. Center your awareness on your spiritual form, a tiny star-like point of light, seated in the middle of your forehead. Really experience the difference between you, the sparkling star, and your body, the physical vehicle. Learn to detach yourself from the vehicle. Even a few moments of this practice, if done regularly, will return you to your natural state of peace. Tiredness will vanish, and irritability too. And your actions will be filled with love for the self and for others. So let's have a meditation now to experience that original peace and experience ourselves as that spiritual being, as the soul, as the driver within this body, this vehicle. So find a comfortable position. Also reposition your body, move it around. Just make sure that there's no tightness or tension anywhere. Take a few deep breaths, because that helps the body to relax. brings oxygen to the brain, bringing freshness and alertness. So we want that incredible balance of being alert and relaxed at the same time. So I take a moment just to find that position physically, to be present, to feel my physical body comfortable, relaxed. And then the next step is for me to become aware of myself as a being of consciousness, as the one who chose to relax the body. The body on its own could not relax. It is based on what I choose to do that the body will respond. And so I become aware of myself as the living being of consciousness, the soul, the spirit, the light that sits in the center of the forehead, behind the eyes, invisible to the physical eyes. I can visualize myself with my mind like a bright sun, a nucleus of living energy that gives out vibrations and has a frequency that radiates a certain kind of energy that makes a difference to the state of matter around it. So I, the living being, become aware that my true nature is to be peaceful, to be powerful, blissful, loveful, and pure. This is the essence of what I radiate. When I'm strong and when I'm whole, then what I radiate What reaches the world is who I am, and there is no difference. When I become weak, then the energy of peace is distorted. And it comes out in a different form. Maybe as impatience or irritation. When I'm weak, I am looking to fill myself anyhow. When I'm strong, I can distribute this energy. I can share and help others become strong. Simply by being aware of who I am. I can strengthen myself and bring back the abundance of peace. For a moment, I just allow that feeling and the fragrance of peace to wash over me. I welcome it. I am peace. I am light. And for a moment, I enjoy this experience. From this place inside the center of the forehead, behind the eyes, it is in this place inside that I can return to again and again throughout the day. To recharge, replenish, and now very gently, still sitting at the center of the forehead, I begin to look through the eyes and become aware that it is I, the living being, who is seeing The eyes are just instruments, windows. Excuse me. And so, very gently, as I see through these eyes, I connect with the physical dimension, with my breathing, with how my body feels, and with my physical surroundings. Thank you. So, this kind of a practice is something that you can develop and adapt to what works for you. But the important thing is to connect with the self, the eternal self. So, is there anything anyone wants to share? Just have a few minutes. How did that go for you?
Radha,
Mm.
I I came, just like some news, like external news about family and stuff, and it was a little disturbing. 2-3 had strokes over the last couple of days, and it was just one of those days when and I meditate daily, but I was a little, my whole, my space was not, everything was not, the water was shaking. And thank you for this meditation.
Thank you.
So, but I have a little observation and a question that for me in particular, and I see with a lot of my friends, sometimes there's a group synergy which carries us forth better than when we do things alone. Is it always, or is it till a certain level? Or
yes, it definitely helps in the sense that it's a little bit like a flock of birds flying together. It's I don't know whether you remember, there used to be this thing that came so many years ago on television about these birds that were, all on the ground, and they were picking the seeds, and suddenly there was this net, and they were all struggling, and then suddenly they all decided, okay, we're all going to lift off. And so I think it was something about unity or something like that. and and they all flew
yes,
together and lifted up. And I think it's a similar thing, because it's a question of vibrations. So I find, and I think many people find, is that we're able to do that even at a distance. We're able to do that because we meet each other, you know, through the internet. But one day, maybe when there is no internet, then will the wireless system of our inner being, that is what will be able to connect with each other. But even on an individual level, you see, what happens is that we are connecting with we're connecting with something that's very deep, uh, and that is, in a sense, I am connecting with my consciousness, you are connecting with your consciousness, and it's like we are connected on another level. And so we're able to communicate at another level. When I think about an individual meditation, there's another aspect which maybe we'll look at next time, which is the connection with the Supreme, and that is a whole different aspect which is absolutely essential for the individual meditation, and for the collective one. But in that case, even if there is no one around, sometimes people find themselves for thousands of kilometers completely alone, but they connect with the Supreme, and the quality of the meditation is very, very powerful. So both are possible, and I think both are needed. Okay. So, Sahil, you want to say something? Anything else?
Yeah. So it's just a suggestion that what Radha spoke, it has very deep implications according to